Burnout and compassion fatigue are results of doing good work, and it's nothing that you have done wrong. Laura Howe. Talking about emotions can bring up a lot of emotions, and broaching this subject in the workplace can add another layer of complexity to the conversation. But it doesn't have to be that way. This mini-series will cover 5 words or word categories that we can start bringing into the workplace to help communicate our emotions in more specific and helpful terms. Hello and welcome to Connect the Dots, Lead the Way. I'm your host, Heather Balsaric. I'm a white female with short strawberry blonde hair. I am wearing tortoiseshell glasses and a purple shirt, and I am sitting in front of a teal wall with multiple pieces of art displayed. Welcome back to day 3. I know that if you are listening to this in sequence or at the time that it's coming out, I am late today. I did not put this episode out in the morning, but it is coming out on day 3. So here we are. There we go. I will be back for day 4 tomorrow and again on day 5. So just anticipate that, they'll come out later in the day probably. Anyways, it's day 3 and today's word category is burnout. Dun, dun, dun. I don't have a fancy soundboard to make that sound, so you get me. What is burnout exactly? So according to Psychology Today, burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. And though it's most often caused by problems at work, it can also appear in other areas of life, such as parenting, caretaking, or romantic relationships. I found the opening quote, the one by Laura, as I was reviewing a list of quotes that I had made over the past several years. And when I read it the other day, I'll be honest, I was a little perplexed about it. It felt weird to say that burnout was a result of doing good work. And for a little additional context here, right, Laura is focused on helping with burnout and compassion fatigue in the ministry. And so that kind of connects some dots there, hopefully. But it did. It felt a little wrong. It felt a little odd to say that burnout was a result of doing good work. And I'm not saying that it's not, because if you're pushing yourself to the point of stress and burnout, there are some underlying things there that are pushing you to do that. And some of it is probably the fact that you're trying to do good work. You are out there trying to do your best. We're going to talk a little bit about perfectionism today. That may be some of the things that are contributing to this burnout. But when we think about the physical exhaustion that is brought on by prolonged or repeated stress in the workplace, this doesn't happen in a day. It's, it happens over time. It's not a quick thing that happens. It's a gradual process that kind of just snowballs, really. So we need to find the words to say and share before we get to that point of burnout. So let's work backwards a little bit. Let's see what emotions that we can address before we get to that burnout stage. Now, all week I have been digging back into Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. So I'm going to share a few more emotions from that book that we can name. And if we can name them early and we can seek out support, then we can help each other prevent burnout or at least lessen the overall effects. And so I've got several here, and I didn't type them out. I'm just going to read them from the book. So if you want to know what the book looks like, this is the book. So we're going to start with the first one I have on my list, which is stress. Let's see. Story time, everybody. But she says, so stressed is in the places we go when things are uncertain or too much. And so she says, so we feel stressed when we evaluate environmental demand as beyond our ability to cope successfully. This includes elements of unpredictability, uncontrollability, and feeling overloaded. And stressful situations can be both physiological, which is your body, or psychological, which is your mind and emotion reactions. And, this is she gives this example in the book between being stressed and overwhelmed of when she worked in a restaurant. And so I'll talk about that in a second. Let me talk about the next word I want to introduce is overwhelmed. And she says overwhelmed means an extreme level of stress, an emotional and or cognitive intensity to the point of feeling unable to function. And gosh, and she also shares from Merriam-Webster that overwhelmed is completely overcome or overpowered by a feeling or thought. And I think, so these two go hand in hand, right? Stress and overwhelm. They're written about together in her book. And because stress is like the first sign. And when stress gets to be too much, it then becomes overwhelm. And she, like she said, she talks in the book about the example of when she worked in a restaurant as a waitress and how if, you were you were behind, you just needed some help, you could walk into the kitchen and be like, hey, I'm in the weeds, man. I'm in the weeds. And then somebody would be like, how can I help you? And you'd say, yeah, go to table. I need, could you retea table 3 and 5? Could you run bread to table 7 and 8? Just, can you help me out for a second? Just help me catch up. And that's stress, right? It's when we've got a lot going on, right? We're feeling a little bit like, oh, okay, maybe if we can ask for help, I'm in the weeds. We can get a couple of people to just help support a little bit. We can lower that stress level. But then she talks about overwhelm in this example would be when somebody would walk into the kitchen and they would just say, I'm blown. And that just simply meant like you were just done, right? You needed a timeout. And she said, if somebody walked into the kitchen and said that, it would go quiet. And immediately, like there would be somebody going to the hostess stand, what are her tables? Let me go fix them. Like the kitchen's over here looking at the table. Like everybody's rallying around you to give you that space to go take 10 minutes and regroup. Right? Let that overwhelm, that extra, what did she call it in here? That extreme level of stress to subside and die down a little bit. And then in 10 minutes, right, you were expected to be ready to go. And I like this analogy because this is what happens, right? We feel that stress, you're doing a project at work. You have a lot of deliverables, and you've got so many things going on. And then it's like, you're starting to feel overwhelmed and it's like, okay, wait a minute. Like I'm in the weeds, right? I got too much to do. Who can I call on to help? Like who's there to help? And, maybe that's your team. Maybe it's a peer. Maybe it's your boss even. Just what can you do to try to lessen that load? And then if you get to the point of being overwhelmed because maybe you didn't stop at the stress moment, you didn't stop to say, hey, I need help. You ended up pushing through and you end up at overwhelm where you are, beyond, what did she say again? The extreme level of stress in the overwhelm. This is when you got to take that time out, right? You got to say, hey, wait a minute. I've got to decompress here. And maybe that looks like taking a day off work. Maybe that looks like taking a half a day, or even, maybe it's just talking to your boss and, hey, I need an hour, right? I need an hour. I need to walk away from this computer. I need to reset this mind because I am overwhelmed with everything that's going on. And if you can start to express those things, that stress level, that feeling of overwhelm, if you can start to do that in the workplace, it can help it can help like not put you to the point of burnout, right? That may still happen. I'm not saying it's not going to happen because it does, but you're at least trying not to let it happen, right? You're doing the work on the front end to help, keep burnout at away. I won't even say at arm's length, farther than arm's length. But you're trying to keep these things in check. So stress, overwhelm. The next word I want to talk about is expectations. And let me find the definition. Okay. So she says in here that when we develop expectations, we paint a picture in our head of how things are going to be and how they're going to look, which is true, right? That's what do we expect to happen from here? And then she says later in here, communicating our expectations is brave and vulnerable. And it builds meaningful connection and often leads to having a partner or friend we can reality check with. And I think this is key. This is why I wanted to bring this word in. This is something we need to really talk about and understand in the workplace a little bit more, is the expectations. Communicating the expectations. So again, it's brave and vulnerable to communicate our expectations. And I'll give you an example, a real life recent example, honestly. So in my job, I'm, developing a program for a leadership development program. And, I've only been here for a couple of months and it has been just a lot. There have been moments of overwhelm here. But when I think about like when my boss and I would have conversations and she would ask like, well, what do you need help with? Or, she would be giving me like this knowledge share of things that had happened before, right? Trying to knowledge transfer. And it would be very overwhelming to me. And expectations were, it's not that they weren't clear, but it was hard because I was new, right? I didn't know how to really decipher these expectations. And so then I have a team. And so I've done my best to try to like manage this fire hose for them, right? Like just turn it on a little, turn it off, turn it on a little, turn it off, and ease them into the program because it is a lot. So, setting expectations for them has been a little different. And so I went through situational leadership too last week. And that's a whole other like podcast to talk about. But in situational leadership, it talks about meeting the person where they are. So as an employee, meeting, you have a development level, like where are you? And so as the manager or the leader, you need to match that person. So if there's somebody that is at a development level 1, they're really excited about what they're doing, but they have no clue. They are inexperienced, don't know what they don't know, but they are excited to dive in. Let's go. That's their attitude. And as a leader, you have to come to that person with a very, very high level of direction. You have to give expectations. You can't just be like, you got it, go and do this thing. I would tell, I apologize to both the members of my team and one of our partners. I was like, listen, I have not done the best job at this. I've been leading you the way that you want to be led. I've been leading with my green energy, my empathy, helping others type of energy. But I've been leading them as far as a development and situational leadership way that has been more of an S4, an S3 or S4, which is where someone is, they are, they understand, right? I don't have to give them a lot of direction. I don't have to give them a lot of support. It's just like, okay, we're going to do this. You good? All right, perfect. Go do and go conquer. And I wasn't doing a good job of that. They were at a D1 level on a lot of things, and I was giving them an S4 leadership of just, low support, low direction, because that's where I was like, oh, they got it. But in all honesty, they were excited and enthusiastic. They have a lot of skills that can transfer over to do this work, but they still need a lot of direction. They need me to set the expectations for them. And so in kind of coming together with my team, we had such a good meeting today where we really dove into situational leadership too, and understanding this information. And so we can get on the same language, because it takes the ego out of a lot of things, because now we can set expectations. Like, I expect as a leader that if my team member says, hey, I am at a D2, right? I'm at a development level 2, right? I'm a little confused. I'm a little frustrated. I feel like I know what I'm doing, but I don't know. Still, there's some things like I still need some support, right? And some direction. I have to be ready for that. I have to set the right expectations for where they are. And this helped as well, because I had a meeting with my leader today that, now that I can speak the language of situational leadership, we were able to go through some very specific things that I was like, hey, I'm at a D1 here. I'm super excited to learn about this thing and to be able to do it. And I got a couple skills I know that I can transfer over, but I don't know what to do here. And I don't know what I don't know, so I need your help there. And we had such a productive conversation today about expectations, what she expects from me, what I expect from her, and that being those things, being able to set those expectations, being brave and vulnerable, building that meaningful connection that Brene talks about, that can help, again, keep burnout in check. It can keep it off the radar, because you have the clear expectations. You know what to expect. You know what to expect from above. You know what to expect from the people maybe you're leading. And then that can help you manage the stress. It can help you manage the overwhelm for yourself and for your team, because you've been clear about those expectations. I hope I didn't get anybody too lost on situational leadership. If so, just let me know. Just send me a message or a comment, and I'll make sure I make it, clear as mud. As my stepfather used to say. Okay. The next one I want to talk about is discouragement. And I forgot to tell this. So expectations and discouragement come from the places we go when things don't always go as planned. Yeah. Those are definitely the emotions there, aren't they? So discouragement. So she talks about in here that being discouraged, she says, discouraged, resigned, and frustrated are also ways that we feel when things aren't going or didn't go as desired. And she said the simple ways to think about this is that if you're disappointed, right, it didn't work out how I wanted, and I believe the outcome was outside of my control. Somebody made a different decision. They went a different direction. Okay, not in my control, so I'm disappointed about it. Regretful. It didn't work out how I wanted, and the outcome was caused by my decisions, my actions, or failure to act. Right? Like, I regret eating the piece of cake. Whatever, that kind of thing. Probably a bad example, but maybe you follow, hopefully. Discouraged. So this is the specific word I want to talk about. But I'm losing my confidence and enthusiasm about any future effort. I'm losing the motivation and confidence to persist. And so discouraged, this really, and even reading it now too, reminds me of situational leadership, because discouraged is losing confidence and enthusiasm in your effort, right? That's something that if you're not letting your leader know that this is happening, they can't come match you with the right expectations, with the right support. So knowing that, hey, I'm discouraged with this. This is the emotion that I'm feeling right now. I need to let my manager know. That is the key to, again, help keep stress and overwhelm and burnout away, right? Because you're being clear in those expectations. Then it says feeling discouraged and resigned are about effort rather than outcome. With discouragement, we're losing the motivation and confidence to continue with our efforts. With resignation, we've lost the motivation to keep trying. And so I think that's, again, it's key to understand how to express this. Because if you can't express your discouragement, if you can't express that you need clear expectations, or you can't express the expectations that you have, that's going to lead to the stress. And then if you can't talk about the stress, that's going to lead to the overwhelm. And if you can't talk about the overwhelm, that's going to lead to the burnout. It's a cycle, right? So like I said before, we're working backwards to figure out what are the words, what are the emotions, what are the things that we need to be aware of so we can speak up sooner so we don't get to that place of burnout. I have 3 more. Yeah, 4. 2, 3.5. One of them is 2 that go together. The next one is perfectionism, which is a topic I can talk a lot about. Recovering perfectionist here. So perfectionism. So in the book, this is in the section places we go when we fall short. And she says, shame is the birthplace of perfectionism. Perfectionism is not striving to be our best or working toward excellence. Healthy striving is internally driven. Perfectionism is externally driven by a simple but potentially all-consuming question. What will people think? And I'm going to read this little bit longer section. It's on this really nice, beautiful quote page here too. But it says, it may seem counterintuitive, but one of the biggest barriers to working toward mastery is perfectionism. In our leadership research, we've learned that achieving mastery requires curiosity and viewing mistakes and failures as opportunities for learning. Perfectionism kills curiosity by telling us that we have to know everything or we risk losing or we risk looking less than. Perfectionism tells us that our mistakes and failures are personal defects, so we either avoid trying new things or we barely recover every time we inevitably fall short. Again, perfectionism is something that, like this book is one of the things that really, really spoke to me about perfectionism. This one and Dare to Lead. I will say Brene probably helped me the most in my recovering of perfectionism. And the fact that perfectionism is that, it's externally driven, right? What will people think? And so keeping that in check, obviously you're going to need to get feedback on things. You're going to need to get feedback on stuff from your boss, from maybe your boss's boss. There are things that like right now in the pipeline of my approvals, it goes to the chief human resources officer. Like that's like, what? Like it's a little scary, right? But my motivation, it's a healthy striving. It's internal. It's not a perfectionism. It's not oh my gosh, what are they going to think? I got to make sure. No, like that's not the environment that I'm in. Thankfully, I've been in that environment before. And being able to name and separate it to say, okay, what I'm doing right now, is this internally driven or is this externally driven? Am I looking to say, What will people think? Will I get the accolades? Will I get the awards? Will people like it? While some of that is okay, if that's all that you are consumed with, that's when it tips over into that perfectionism, like that bucket tips over. So just be really mindful of how you're thinking about like the different things that you're doing, and if you're falling into perfectionism, because that causes stress, which causes overwhelm, which causes burnout. Like you see, you're following me. I know you are. Okay. The next 1/2, it's connection and disconnection. And this is from the section, places we go when we search for connection. Well, that seems fitting, doesn't it? So connection, she says, across my research, I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they can derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. I like this. Connection is our neurobiology. Now, disconnection is often equated with social rejection, social exclusion, and or social isolation. And these feelings of disconnection actually share the same neural pathways as the feelings of physical pain. I love the neuroscience part of this stuff. So in terms of how can understanding and talking about the connection and disconnection at work, how can that help us keep burnout at bay, right? How can using these words and these ideas and expressing these things help us in the workplace? Is if you're feeling that disconnect, if you feel like you are being excluded, if you feel like you are being isolated, it's having the ability to say, wait, I feel disconnected from what's going on. What can we do? What can I do to get back? What can I do to feel that connection again? Because having the connection, those things come together. And if you're connected with someone, then you're able to talk about these feelings. You're able to talk about how you feel maybe disconnected from somebody on the team, or how you feel like professionalism, perfectionism is causing you issues, or you're discouraged with something, or you're not clear on expectations. So if you're able to build the good connections there, you're able to, again, express these things more openly to help you keep burnout at bay. Last one, anger. I can't do my best like evil laugh or anything. That feels weird. Okay. Anger. So, it says here, if you look across the research, you learn that anger is an emotion that we feel when something gets in the way of a desired outcome, or when we believe there's a violation of the way things should be. Absolutely. She talks about anger is an action emotion, right? We want to do something when we feel it. You want to hit a wall. You want to throw something. You want to scream. You want to yell. You want to cry. You want to do something. It's an action. And then she says, though, anger is also a full contact emotion because it activates our nervous system and can hijack our thoughts and behaviors. It can take a real toll on our mental and physical health. So there's another quote about anger that I want to talk about. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm going to read this quote and then bring it back together, and then we'll be ready to wrap this up. Anger is a catalyst. Holding on to it will make us exhausted and sick. Internalizing anger will take away our joy and spirit. Externalizing anger will make us less effective in our attempts to create change and forge connection. It's an emotion that we need to transform into something life-giving: courage, love, change, compassion, justice. So, anger, if you can realize those moments that the emotion of anger start to build, right? If it's because you feel disconnected, if it's because you feel like somebody said something to you, and so the perfectionist side of your brain was like, angry, or you're upset, right? And so you're discouraged because, you didn't do something the way you wanted it to be done. Being able to name it, to call it, to say it, those are the things that, again, it helps lessen the stress so you don't get to overwhelm, so you don't get to burnout. And this is by no means an exhaustive list of words. I mean, I could go through all like 82 or however many are in this book and relate them back to this, honestly. But if we can begin to identify and name the emotions in the workplace, then we can be better prepared to support one another. And psychological safety, trust, connection, right? Those things play a big role for letting individuals speak these emotions and work through them in the workplace. If you don't have that space at work, I encourage you to see if your company offers an employee assistance program, often called EAP, right? Those benefits can help you connect with a counselor. You may get a couple of free sessions, or they may just be able to connect you with one. If you have insurance, you can maybe utilize those benefits and find a counselor near you. There are also places online to get support. The key is to find a group or a person that you can share these emotions with and work through them, right? To develop a plan to avoid burnout. These are really key things. And I think they're part of the reason, like, I struggled last night to write this podcast, and why I'm not recording it until tonight is because it's a subject near and dear to my heart. I've been there. I have been at the burnout. I've been in the pit of burnout, and it's terrible. It's a terrible feeling. And so being able to like go back and, like I talked about, like working backwards and figuring out what are those emotions, what are the things that we can talk about in the workplace to help us avoid getting there? What are the signs that we can see in our peers or our leaders or our direct reports, right? What can we see that maybe can help keep them from the stress and the overwhelm and the burnout? If you have any additional words that we can, use to help express our emotions before we get to burnout, I'd love to know what they are. I'd love for you to head over to my Substack. The link is in that description to comment. I'd love to know your thoughts. Like, what other words or what things have helped you get through this? Maybe get through stress and overwhelm to avoid burnout. Make sure you check out the links in the description to learn more about burnout from the Psychology Today article and Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. I'll be back tomorrow with more words for the workplace. But until then, remember that you are loved, you are worthy, and there are great things ahead for you in this life if you trust and believe in the Lord. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.